Welcome to the Crewscope podcast, where we focus on learning from successful leaders in the construction industry who engage workers and create motivating work environments. I'm Calvin Benchamal, the co-founder and CEO of Crewscope, and I'm your host today. I'm thrilled to have Sean Reid, founder and CEO of Arrowhead Construction Leadership Solutions. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks for having me, Calvin. Great to be here.
So I've worked with Sean for the past couple of years, and as we validated the labor challenges in the construction industry, and Sean has offered always consistently great perspective on the human stories behind the problems. I'm happy to have Sean here. Sean, why don't we start at the beginning? I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey professionally, and then starting in like how you ended up in this industry and in your role today.
Yeah, sure. So for basically the common thread throughout my career has been helping leaders to lead in one capacity or another. So I actually started my career when I left university. I actually started working in politics. I was a speechwriter and a communications assistant for a Canadian federal cabinet minister. I did that for a few years, and then I made a complete left turn and moved into the software industry, where I was a corporate communications executive, working with every day with the CEO of one of Canada's, at the time, one of Canada's largest software companies. Did that for about 10 years, and then took another left turn, and was invited to help launch and found the Ontario operations of a national construction association. And I had really very little construction background. So that's where I really kind of fell in love with the construction industry in particular. And in that role, in addition to actually building up this organization and putting into practice my own leadership capacity, I was also working alongside every day the CEOs of it was a mixed trade association, so general contractors, subtrades, ICI, mostly ICI or civil contractors. And really, the focus of our organization at the time was delivering services that help these CEOs manage and maximize productivity from their workforce. Um, and so I really learned a lot about the challenges of leadership and the challenges of uh, impacting consistent productivity on the construction work site. And so I did that for about 10 years and really loved it, had a fair bit of success growing the organization. And then I wanted to, I really felt a call really, to work more closely and more directly with these leaders in the construction industry. And so I launched my own company at that point, which was Arrowhead, where we were focused on really trying to develop and support leaders in construction, whether they were emerging leaders, supervisors, project managers, people, the next generation of leadership in companies, or working alongside the CEO and leadership teams themselves. But all along my career path, it's been helping leaders to lead, and the last 15 years or so, it's been helping construction leaders really be successful.
Great, thanks for sharing. You talked about productivity on sites and how that was a focus in your career. Um, I know this is a contentious topic, but in your view, is labor productivity on construction sites, is it stagnant? Is it declining? Has it improved with technology over the years? Where are we at today with productivity on job sites?
I, I think it depends on who you ask in our industry. Um, I think what's fair to say is that with the increased application and opportunity for application of technology in our industry, whether that's the kind of physical technology that we have, even things like these supports that workers have for arms when it comes to installation, or the equipment they have to access different spots in the job site more safely, more comfortably, more sustainably, or whether it's more like digital technology and the things that the tools that are available to manage the schedule and rollout of projects in a more productive and efficient way. We have never had more technology at our disposal to have the potential for productivity in the job site. What is getting in the way, particularly with, in my opinion, with small and medium sized contractors, which of course makes up the majority of the industry, is their ability to actually adopt some of these technologies and also to enforce or apply productive processes and practices consistently across their field teams. And a lot of that comes down to culture and leadership, which is really why I've spent my time focused on that area. All the technology in the world doesn't make a job site more productive if there aren't leaders enforcing and manifesting cultures of accountability in their workplace.
Okay, so that's I think a good segue to the leadership and to the people here in construction. Before the show, we were chatting about you were sharing a story about some of your clients who are losing their best people, and I would love to just hear you just talk about that story a little bit because I think it brings up a good transition here.
Sure. I mean, I think so. One of the challenges I just mentioned was creating a culture of accountability in a job site. In my opinion, one of the reasons that one of the significant reasons we still have productivity challenges in construction is because of an absence of accountability, of real accountability on in our field teams in particular. What happens too often is contractors are losing their best people because they're working alongside colleagues and coworkers who they see either underperforming or maybe doing their work unsafely, inefficiently, ineffectively, just not working well while they're busting their arse doing things, trying to do things well, doing a job, and seeing no difference in the way the company is treating their good work versus the underperformance of other coworkers. And that can be frustrating for a good worker. You don't feel appreciated in that kind of an environment. And so what happens is you end up. So one of the companies that I worked with for a long time was seeing this problem where they kept seeing their best people walking out the door. And at one point I would say, well, how is behavior enforced on the job site? And what they were experiencing was supervisors who, would see an infraction, maybe a safety infraction, and they'd kind of wag their finger or wave their arms around and yell a lot, drop some F bombs, and then that would be it. And nothing else would happen. There was no escalating discipline. There was no enforcement of actual rules or principles on the job site. And so, their good workers, their good employees would see this and be like, well, this is not I can't do my work safely here. I can't do my work well here in this kind of environment. I'm going to leave and go somewhere where they actually care about safety and performance. And so as soon as the company started to see this, we could then start to address, okay, well, what's preventing supervisors from actually enforcing the rules of the job site? And typically there's two things in particular that stand out. One is supervisors often don't feel like the company actually has their back. And so for what I mean by that is a supervisor will say, well, if I enforce this discipline to the extent where I have to walk somebody off the site, I have to send them home for the day because they're a repeat offender in this particular safety infraction, for example. I'm going to get, torn a new one by my boss because because all he cares about is that we meet make our customers happy and meet our deadlines. So if I walk this guy off the job site, that's going to impact our ability to actually finish the job on time. So supervisors too often don't feel like they have the support of their leadership team behind them. That in fact the leadership is not concerned about safety. Ultimately, they're concerned about just getting the work done at whatever cost. So that's issue number one: is that supervisors need to see consistently that their leadership teams actually expect them to enforce the rules on the job site. And the second piece is that too often supervisors, especially younger supervisors, see themselves or want to be more friends with their coworkers on the site than leaders. And the fear is, well, if I discipline them, um, they're a one is they think they have to get mad at them. They have to say mean things about them and get mad at them, which is false. And we can talk about that in a second. But secondly, they think, well, they're not going to like me. Well, the reality is, first of all, in my experience, what happens, and I can think of one example in particular, a supervisor that I was working with on this, that was surprised when he actually found out first that when he started to enforce the rules, the rest of the team that was trying to hold the rules, hold consistent with the rules, actually respected him more as a result. He had stronger loyalty from his best team members when he was enforcing the rules on those who were underperforming or taking shortcuts on health and safety protocols. So that was counterintuitive to this supervisor. Like, well, if I actually enforce the rules, they're not going to like me. Turns out workers actually like you more, respect you, want to work around you when you walk your own talk as a leader. So that's lesson number one. And in lesson number two is I lost it. Sorry. So hopefully you can trim that one out when we get to it.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So what's interesting about what you're saying is that it's not actually about recognizing the top performers and celebrating their outperformance. What you're talking about is just setting a floor for performance, right? You want to set a minimum standard, required expectations that you're going to hold the entire crew to, and they have to meet that expectation, or of course go beyond it. Um,
Yeah.
you were talking a little bit about why that's hard. I mean, it's hard
Mm.
for one, you said, because they don't necessarily feel that they're backed up by the company, and two, there's they want to be friends with the crew, let's say that, or they think that they have to be soft. Um,
Mm.
what are I want to hear a little bit more around how you build up the rest of the team by maintaining a consistent performance standard. I'm thinking to my own experience now. When I was at Lafarge, I was a young manager and I was managing a frontline team, and we had four people on the team that were performing very well, and we had one person who wasn't. That one person who wasn't also had tended to be very experienced and had a lot of knowledge, and so there was a lot of I was afraid to discipline this person because I was afraid that they would leave, or that that we couldn't function without them. But what I realized was that I actually needed to maintain a consistent expectation, um, for the other four people on my team that were performing very well. Because if I wasn't doing that, their performance was going to drop too, because they saw that standards didn't matter, and if one person can get away with it, then so can they. So maybe you could share a few more stories around that. Like, why is that so important in terms of like celebrating good workers and maintaining that performance standard?
Fundamentally, everybody wants to show up at work and feel like their work has value. That when they put in good work, it will be recognized, and that it has meaning to the overall project and the overall team. So when people show up, feel like they put in good work, and see and don't experience a sense that A, their good work is recognized, or B, the underperformance of somebody else is also is held at par with their good work, that immediately sends a message, either consciously or subconsciously, to the worker that that they're what they're doing lacks value. And so when a company establishes and enforces a certain culture, a certain set of expectations, um, they're saying to they're saying to the team, um, we want to treat you and the work and the contribution you make with dignity and respect. We honor what you're doing here. And we're going to honor that by recognizing the good performance. And we're going to honor that by also addressing underperformance so that we can see that there's a distinction, that there is meaningful difference in value in good work. And so that's, when you don't enforce that for the sake of keeping everybody happy, not ruffling feathers, not rocking the boat, you're actually saying to the team, your work doesn't matter.
Mm.
And those people who come to work expecting to to experience some dignity in what they do, or some sense that what they're doing has value, are immediately going to feel unvalued or undervalued when they show up on the job site. Now, any warm body will do. Now, the quality of my work doesn't particularly matter. So why should I be here when that's the message that my company is sending me?
Um, you suggested a couple reasons why that's hard to do, but we were talking before the show around unclear goals and expectations sometimes on site,
Mm-hmm.
and how it takes time and it takes some discipline to plan work and clarify our thinking around those goals. And I imagine that that's necessary to set this performance standard. I mean, the leader has to know what the expectations are. They need to be clear themselves around what they expect before they could even imagine to set that standard with their people. So why is that hard? Why is that so hard to do on site today?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I, my opinion, a lot of times, two things get in the way of clear goal setting. One is this sort of frenzied sense that we just need to get down to the work, and that goal setting is some sort of bureaucratic process that gets in the way of actual work. And then the other problem with goals that I think some contractors experience is sort of this is that tyranny of accountability. Well, now I actually have to meet this expectation, or heaven forbid I should hold somebody else accountable for meeting that expectation. So those kinds of fears get in the way, I think, of a lot of. Again, I particularly see this in the small and medium sized contractors, maybe the growing ones who are having newer leaders running their operations, newer relationships in terms of the people that they're working with. But the irony of it is that the beauty of goals is they depersonalize everything. A lot of times, leaders in construction feel like this is all personal. That they have to get angry with the person and get mad at them and make them feel like they don't like them anymore in order to get some change in their behavior. But the beauty of goals is it's completely objective. You either are hitting your targets or you're not. The fact of the matter is we're currently not meeting our targets. So something has to change. What can we change? And if we can't change anything meaningfully, if we're just not able to hit those targets, then this probably isn't the right fit for you. This probably isn't If I'm a supervisor talking to a worker about certain performance expectations that are objectively documented, and they're consistently, even with advice and changes, consistently not hitting those targets, it's not personal. It's just clearly not working. And so we'd both be better off finding another opportunity that's a better fit. This it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be emotional. It doesn't have to be personal. There's a clear expectation, and you or I are either a fit for that expectation or we're not. And if we're not, then we can either change or leave, and that's okay. If it's not a fit, it's not a fit. Go and find the opportunity that is a fit. So there's a sense that sometimes goals and targets are a tyranny, but actually they're a real service to the contractor because they depersonalize. They take the emotion out of this, out of discipline, out of productivity, and really just make it about objective fit or lack thereof.
Hmm. And if I can just connect the dots here, you're saying, to start this personal based feedback or discipline, sort of fear based, threats or getting angry. And I think we can agree today that that doesn't work.
Mm.
Especially with the labor crisis we've heard from clients stories where, um, they try to use those old fashioned methods and people just leave. So that doesn't work. But you're talking now about these objective goals, that eliminates the fear or the threats and just moves it more to an objective type of performance standard that is more accountable.
Mm.
But you said, and I'd like to hear your thoughts a little bit more on this, that there's a sphere of accountability. So how does that show up? Why is there such a fear of accountability in construction? What are people afraid of?
Well, I think you put your finger on it earlier. I think people are afraid of losing people. They're particularly afraid of losing their best people. Um, but the irony is that in my experience, and I can think of about half a dozen contractors I've worked with in the last year alone, where the reverse has proven out, where as contractors enforce accountability in their job sites, their best people stay, they lose their underperformers, or their underperformers actually wake up and step up and improve their performance. So I think there's a fear that with accountability comes a breakdown of relationships, but in fact, the opposite has been proven true over and over again to be true. That with accountability, the best performers stay and the underperformers improve or leave.
Hmm. Um, we've heard some stories from clients. I don't know if you've heard this, where they say, we need some talented people on our job, but we also just need people to show up, and they call those people just a heartbeat. We just need people with a heartbeat to just turn up.
Yeah.
Um, and so how do you balance that between the need to set those clear objectives to help your best people perform and meet those standards, but then this, whether it's right or wrong, this need to just have people with a heartbeat just turn up on your site.
I mean, I think that attitude is. I've heard it before too, and I think even those who are those contractors who convey that attitude would admit that that's an unfortunate reality that they're experiencing. That for whatever reason they can no longer expect to have high performance across a significant part of their organization, and in particular their field teams. They now simply have to have a core that they can count on, a core of loyalists who drink the Kool-Aid and will show up every day. And then the vast majority of the rest of them are kind of warm bodies that they hope to whip along the way. Um, that's, I think there's a sort of a general resignation in parts of the industry that that's the way it has to be. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be that way. Um, the cure to that is to actually create systems of accountability, metrics, targets, product of behavior, of safety protocol, and of productivity expectations, and then to enforce them. But that's hard work. That's a new discipline that a contractor has to choose to take on with some heavy lifting against currents in order to actually make that a reality. And so that feels like a daunting task to a lot of contractors who are just running around just trying to stay afloat. And and so I can understand why they would be resistant to doing that. But again, I think all of the both anecdotal and research on these topics show that when contractors actually make the effort to enforce accountability and create cultures of accountability in their job sites, that the benefits pay off. There is no longer this sort of any warm body will do. You don't have to have that policy anymore because productivity can be infectious. It can be contagious if they see that accountability is enforced across the job site. People will step up and elevate their performance.
I mean, you and I agree that boosting productivity is fun and contagious. I love that word that you used. But there's also, I mean, taking this back to just some of the stories and some of the dark side here of accountability. Um, I'd love your experience, but what we've seen and heard from some of our clients is that this is a huge change. In the past, there was very little information that passed from the site to the office. Um, in fact, this was a culture of a very little accountability, where the site leader themselves was a king of sorts, where they ran their site and they were in control of everything that happened there. And they shared only what they wanted to share with the office. And it was this idea
Mm,
that well, the office doesn't really know what we do, and
mm,
they don't really, we're in charge here, and we know how to get things done. So just trust us to do that.
mm,
Um, and what you're talking about, um, really starts to now make things more transparent. We're talking about objective measures of performance, clear expectations that can be clearly seen and measured and viewed. Um, so I'm curious about some stories that you might have around sort of the personal impact that this has on the site leaders and the kind of transition and support that they need to go through to be successful with this new culture of accountability that you're talking about.
mm. Well, I again, I think that that behavior, of supervisors or project managers or who would rather just be left alone to run their job. Um, and and let's touch base again when the job's done and the customer's happy. That is a reality in construction today, particularly contractors who that I have worked with, a number of trade contractors who take on jobs further than, let's say, further than a few hours away, from headquarters. Anytime you've got sort of often the model that's used is you deploy kind of a core team that's your kind of your one of your team of loyalists that you move around from site to site all over your whatever the geographic scope of your market is, and then you surround them with a periphery of workforce, maybe local workers and that sort of thing. Um, if you don't have the ability, if the contractor doesn't have the ability to be on site regularly in that, then they just sort of delegate that job to some trusted loyalist, and that's it. So that dynamic happens a lot. Um, it typically, you get that attitude of just leave us alone until we're done when there are no performance metrics in place, when essentially the how of a building project doesn't matter, is irrelevant. All that matters is at the end of the day the job gets done reasonably close to on time, reasonably close to on budget, and there's no drama that would affect the long term relationship with the client. Otherwise, no other metrics particularly matter. Just keep us out of trouble. That's unfortunately, that's the level of construction metrics and performance metrics that many contractors, again, particularly in the small and medium sized range, operate by. Um, the what I think more and more companies are experiencing in this as they're growing is that actually metrics, performance metrics, can be a help for a contractor who has jobs that are not immediately around the corner, that they can't personally go and view every day and be on site for, because they're it is objectively viewable in terms of the whatever the metrics are, how the job is going. And there's plenty of metrics that companies can come up with to measure the how of their projects. um, and when those companies put those in place, yeah, it can be uncomfortable for supervisors. On the other hand, there's no more communication that's required, no more micromanaging that's required. You're either hitting those targets or you're not. So supervisors shouldn't, and often don't, in the end, feel particularly micromanaged, when they're just in the sense of, my boss is always calling me, asking me how things are going, because it's objectively there. Every week there's a report, or every day in some cases there's a report about how much progress we're making. There's no more discussion that needs to be had unless there's a significant problem that arises from those metrics. So, in my experience, the contractors that choose to put in place a robust set of performance metrics that measure the how of a job in terms of how it's being executed. Yes, there's some static at first in the relationship between leadership and the site leadership, but typically that ends up working itself out as companies realize that there's no need for a lot of hovering and helicopter leadership, when the objective metrics of how a project is executing are viewable for everybody.
Well, that's great. Before we wrap up, Sean, do you have any final thoughts or advice that you'd like to share?
Um, I think the number one thing that I have seen over and over and over again, especially when we're talking about small and medium size companies that are growth oriented, that are trying to move into that next level of enterprise scale construction, is this fear that accountability equals retention risk. That if I create more accountability in my job site, I have a higher risk of losing my best people. And all of the data, anecdotal and quantitative, that exists in the industry points to the exact opposite. The more you create a culture of accountability on your job sites and throughout your construction organization, the more easily you're going to retain your best people and attract even better people to your organization over time.
Well, that's fantastic. That's a great way to wrap up, Sean. Thank you so much for being on our first Crewscope podcast. Loved hearing your stories about human experience in the field, and about the value of creating accountability and how that can drive a true performance culture on site. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Calvin.
All right.